Hello, Shweta, and welcome to the Regenerative Work-Life podcast. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you, Alyssa. Nice to be here.
Why don't you start by giving us an idea of what it was that brought you to do this coaching session today?
Well, first of all, the title itself, Regenerative Coaching, it totally connected me with the path that I am looking towards, which is this inherent principle of life being regenerative and walking away from this concept that we have to work all the time and that our identity is bound so much with work. And what does it even mean to experience a balanced life? And so when I saw the coaching opportunity and I read about your launch, I was like, okay, this is an opportunity that is another way to explore and experience your own feelings about what is regeneration to your ethos, to your work-life balance. And so that's why I'm here.
And I love how you express that, because I think it's definitely something personal to each of us, how we understand regeneration. And I think it really should be as well. It's not one fixed definition. So where are you on your regenerative work journey?
Well, if we look at the journey as, you start with the highs of experiencing different aspects of work through different jobs, different titles, and different positions. Um, I've experienced that in a certain setting, in a certain environment. And it has still, through that experience, let's say, I've come to a phase of stillness. And it's a conscious choice of being still and taking a break from the continuous incessant way of working. And that's where I am, and I'm regenerating in this phase, and literally like just taking a break and really being with myself and asking myself, who am I and what am I here to do? What are my gifts to the world that I can bring and share with the communities that I'm going to be a part of? And that's where I am, like really asking those questions, sitting with the feelings of being uncomfortable and being different, which we all are, and to really embrace that difference, right? That's the challenge, because it's so easy to give into the state of I want to be like everybody else. We want to be the same. So to be okay with being different, and then looking forward to the next phase, whatever that might be. I still don't know what that is, but I'm hoping I could get some more clarity through the coaching session of what that could be that's aligned with me and my values.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're allowing yourself this period of stillness and this space, and it sounds like you're already doing, a lot of the work that I encourage clients to do, particularly you mentioned the discomfort, and sitting in that discomfort and sitting with questions. It's not easy work, and I applaud you for doing it. I've been there myself.
Mm,
I describe it less as stillness as more as the kind of being lost period,
yeah,
and being consciously lost, and sort of embracing getting lost, which is again not something, as you say, in this kind of this culture of always being on and incessantly working, we don't allow ourselves space or stillness or to get lost. um, does it feel like, you mentioned getting clarity on the sort of next steps,
hmm
does it feel like the right time for you to start moving out of that stillness?
yes. I think the timing, I'm not sure to be honest. It does feel like the right time um, only because I've kind of checked the milestones of, what I've made this transition. I've come from California. I'm here now in the UK. So there have been steps that I had to take in order to get here and get settled. And I've checked all those boxes. And the one box that's pending is what about work? Like, how do I be a part of a system where I feel nourished as I am producing as well? And it's in my nature to create with a sense of passion, with a sense of commitment. And so I feel like it's time for me to step back out and participate in that culture again. But this time it's different because I've changed jobs so many times, and usually I've just left one because I'm running away from something. And this is almost the first time that I've deliberately said, I'm not going to run away. I'm going to move towards something. And when you're moving towards something, it almost feels like I don't want to say yes to everything that comes my way. I want to be very conscious of what I choose to apply to in terms of a job or in terms of networking with somebody, and then saying yes to that movement. But it's scary because you don't have so many opportunities. Now you start, there's almost like a funnel and you're filtering more and more and more. So from a standpoint of just pure probability, I'm like, am I going to get that? Am I going to get what I'm really seeking? Will I have to compromise in the end? And it leaves me even with the question of, are we putting too much importance on job and what job brings into our lives? So it almost takes a very spiritual and philosophical set of like questions that rises during this time.
Yeah, it's I'm really interested by how you described this, and tell me where I'm wrong. But what I'm
Hmm.
hearing is that there is a fear that if you filter too much, that at some point those possibilities or those opportunities are going to kind of dry up, and you'll be
Correct.
left with nothing. Is that,
Correct.
am I hearing that correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I also have a sense at the same time that perhaps that you really want to trust yourself in that filtering.
Hmm.
And, I'm hearing that you don't want to just say yes in the way that you might have in the past. And you want to be really conscious and aware of what you're choosing, and that there's this kind of tension between making those conscious choices and then this fear that, well, what if it doesn't materialize?
Correct. Yeah. It's exactly that tension. You've articulated it correctly. Yep.
Okay. So, Shweta, how do you know when an opportunity, you mentioned something like networking, a conversation or an event, how do you know when it feels right to you?
Well, my if I have to observe my body, it's more in the sense of just the energy that flows through when I'm holding that conversation, and it feels so much like I'm I'm getting charged up. So if you think of a battery, for instance, I'm not getting drained. I'm getting charged up as those conversations are happening. I'm going through an interview process. I don't come out of it feeling exhausted. I come out of it feeling like, oh my God, I really want this job. That doubt isn't there. You're not in a state of I don't know what this holds, but I might just say yes anyway. You don't have that. You're just like, yes, this is the person I want to work with or partner with or any of that. So it just
Yeah.
charges me up. Yeah.
So, what would it be like to give yourself, you've given yourself this period of stillness and of questioning. Is it viable for you to give yourself a period of only saying yes when something is charging your batteries?
I think what holds me back there is how long is that period going to be?
Yeah.
Because as you might know, it's always the fear of having a gap on your CV or having too much of a gap, right? I mean, I've still made a move. I still have, a lot of steps that I've taken very strategically to position myself for this career break. And when the yes might be too long out there, then I'm like, how long do I have to wait? So I guess it's the uncertainty
Mm,
of not knowing when that yes is coming.
yeah, of
I'd
course.
most definitely love to wait and say yes, but if that's like 8 months down the road, that might be too much. I don't know.
Mm. Now, when you say it might be too much, in
Hmm.
what sense? Because you described someone might look and question this gap
Yeah.
on your
Hmm.
CV. I totally understand that. It's a very rational concern to have. It's also very corporate way of seeing things, right? That we're supposed to have these kind of perfectly structured CVs that take us in this kind of, incremental growth trajectory. And, you talked about one of the things that you wanted to do is kind of step out of that kind of
Yes.
conventional way of seeing work. So I just want to kind of highlight, when you say, well, that might be too much for
Mhm.
who? Is it too much for a potential employer, or is it too much for your nervous system? Is it too much for your financial reality? Like, can we get kind of specific about what that too much means?
I think it'll be too much for my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do feel very, very privileged in having the resources to take the time off. So that is not weighing me down in any way, but it is more about just the nervous system. Yeah, you've got it right. Because what do you do if you're not working in a way that is like fulfilling you, where you're generating, where you're creating? And a big aspect of work is also getting to meet different people and have the conversations, problem solving together, or creating solutions. And a part of me misses that. I think a big part of me misses that quite a bit, because I don't have that environment of interactions anymore. And so if I can't really see myself 8 months down, I'm just putting a number out there. I hope it's not that long, but
Mm-hmm.
8 months down, I can't stay in that state of isolation. I would want to continue to create and interact.
Yeah.
And I think a work is a way to do that.
And those are really, those are really natural, nature-based kind of urges that you have, to create, to generate, to connect, to be part of community. And the fact that you said that this is a nervous system kind of concern, I think gives us some real opportunities to go a bit deeper here, because those things that you talked about wanting, the creation, the community, the interactions, they are things that you could potentially get outside of a kind of conventional employed salaried work situation.
Mm.
Just as an example, you could maybe do, volunteering as a way of having those kind of connections and giving yourself more time to, to really work with this filter of what is really charging my batteries.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm suggesting that as a potential course for us just to consider is that I think that that filter that you described is your guide. That feeling that you talked about of when I'm in a situation or a conversation or a person and it just fills up my energy,
Mhm.
and it's all yes for me. I think that is what is going to tell you that you're moving in the right direction. That is what's going to give you the clarity that you're looking for, because honestly, where else is it going to come from? Otherwise it's coming from someone else's idea about
Yes.
what your next move should be, right? Or my idea about what it, like, the only thing I believe that you can truly trust is how it feels to you. And you articulated it so clearly. You knew immediately when I said, what did it feel like? You knew what it felt like. So you're right there connected to that feeling.
Hmm.
And I think it would be so powerful to give yourself this opportunity to trust that feeling and see where it takes you.
Yeah. And I have to fully accept that. Almost I'm in that phase where I'm kind of oscillating between saying yes and staying in that state versus I then step back. And I think the fear of stepping back is because, when you get on LinkedIn and then you start seeing all your colleagues or, other members, if they're doing things, they're posting stuff. And then I'm like, oh, but I'm not doing that stuff. And so the peer pressure comes up. But you're right. I've also experienced the downside of saying yes too soon, because after a while the job doesn't excite me, or I realized that my intuition always said no, don't go for that, wait, and I said, oh no, I need a job, I'm going in. And then I've regretted it, and I've come out of a pretty challenging work situation because I continued to ignore my intuition and kept moving ahead. And so I don't want to do that again. I want to really say yes only if it's a yes. And I did attempt to join Schumacher College for one of their foundation courses and really start networking through that and getting, an amazing educational experience. But unfortunately, they closed.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been a huge hit to the community, and it's but so that kind of takes a step back. So again, I'm back in that state of how do I connect? Like you mentioned volunteering. So how would I even approach that? Because I'm again new to the land here as well. So I don't have the connections to even start approaching those new ways of community, being in community.
So, in theory, would something like volunteering, if we take a put aside just for 1 second the challenge that you mentioned of being, new to this country and not having the connections right now, in theory, do you feel like volunteering of some kind would give you that kind of creativity and connection that you're looking for?
Depends on what type, I mean, what sector or what space. So the area that really excites me is kind of in the space of systems change and systems
Mm-hmm.
transformation, where I'm able to, look at a whole problem, for instance, and then come up with how those problems are interconnected, or and how do you begin to define or identify leverage points and then start taking actions on those leverage points. So very much like the Donella Meadows systems view of life and Khrushchev Capra and so on. So those are the kind of hubs and communities I want to be a part of, even in terms of volunteering, to actively participate in solving problems. And I don't know if that how that exists here and how to reach to those communities. I have a few definitely that I know of and I'm a part of, but it's not on a day-to-day basis, or it's not in a very what do you say? What's the word? In a very recurring basis. It's more like on and off
Yeah.
here and there. They're very scattered.
Mm-hmm. So, have you? Can you tell me about a time in your past when you've moved into a new area, maybe geographically or thematically, where you've had to sort of build things up from scratch? Have you had that experience?
I have. So I was an aerospace engineer, and then I think 7 years into the industry, I decided, okay, I want to change more into conservation and climate. And so that move was not so organized. It just all happened in a span of few days. So I started taking a degree in environmental science and policy from Johns Hopkins, and that was my way of stepping into this new area or this new sector. And the education and learning new concepts really charged me. So
Okay.
education is something I really appreciate because you learn new things, and that's always fulfilling to your nervous system, to your mind, and you come up with more ideas and more ways of understanding different situations. And so I started doing that, and I was fortunate enough to reach out to my city manager in California. This was back then, and she had an opening, and I got in. It just happened overnight, literally. And so that was my big break. But I did that firstly just by starting to learn about this new way or new sector,
Mhm.
and then just an accident, a synchronicity or whatever you call it, right? And I got the job. So it was less than a week that I was unemployed, or I
Amazing.
left a job and I got another job. And that was my first nonprofit experience. And I learned a lot about how nonprofits work through that. This situation right now is kind of different because I'm already in the sector. I'm in the space of climate change and sustainability. That's where I am, and that's where I'd like to be. But it's more that it's a new land, and there are so many different organizations. There's so many different um, jobs, and I don't know how to apply or how to approach them. And is project manage, or I'll just use the title of project manager. Is that the same between US and UK, or are they different?
So I hear you
Yeah.
saying that it's different this time, but I
Hmm.
want to challenge you on that because I'm not so sure that it's that different. Because what I heard from the experience that you shared before is that you made, a pretty kind of dramatic shift in your career in a very
Yeah.
short space of time, right? And like you said, there was a lot of learning involved. You must have had to, learn and adapt very quickly in that
Mm.
situation to make it a success. And obviously it was a success. You were offered this opportunity within a very short space of time. There was a lot of synchronicity happening. I'm wondering if what is different is not actually, that was something kind of topical and this is something sort of geographic or, cultural and learning to be in a new country, but whether it's something around trusting yourself. Because what I felt when you were telling me that story of the shift you made in the past, like even your whole face lit up when you were kind of telling me about it. There was a sort of joy in it of like, I don't know, I had this feeling of like, it just kind of happened and I just kind of went with it. And am I right? Is that,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, right?
True.
And so I feel like how can you trust yourself in the same way now? How can you kind of get that energy of like, I'm leaping into this because I know I can make these kind of shifts.
Or do I trust? It's interesting you say that because that's been a big part of my journey of stillness and healing, where I am learning again to trust myself. And and this is the challenge because in the previous work experience that I've had, I literally burnt out like twice. And I didn't stop. Like I just kept going non-stop, working all the time to the point where my body was starting to give up. And these were like really intense work situations, which everybody's work situation is intense, and you kind of have to respect yourself and your own system. And I didn't. I just kept giving and not taking the time to receive. And so in the processes and the experiences that occurred, I just kind of lost trust in myself. I was like, how am I'm not able to discern what is healthy versus what is not, what is true versus what isn't. And so I've come back into the space where I'm learning to trust my own intuition and my own guidance. Like this whole move has been an act of trust, just following myself. So I feel like I'm rebuilding that trust, and I feel like I'm ready to now move into the space again with that sense of trust. It's almost like I'm waiting for the synchronicities to come back in play, so I find the right opportunity to appear. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many kind of nature analogies that kind of sprung up when you were describing that. It's like you're in this period of hibernation or putting down roots and like all the growth that happens
Hmm.
that we don't see externally. And then, I mean, I think buds actually is one of my favorite, the way that the kind of buds form like right at the beginning of winter and then they just kind of sit there and nothing nothing seems to be happening until spring and then they just blossom and I really I feel it's interesting as well that you say you're kind of waiting for the synchronicity. The words that are coming up for me is like, I feel like the synchronicity is waiting for you.
Yeah,
How does
but
that feel?
it feels it feels good, and I want it to be true. And if the synchronicity is waiting for me, let me ask a question then what is it that I need to do?
Yeah.
You see what yeah.
So I think there's a couple of things. And what I would say is, first of all, I think you need to give yourself permission to be in this, what I call like the lost stage, or, the stillness stage, the questioning stage, for as long as you need to be in it. And
Hmm.
that's a hard ask, right? But it's a real
Yeah.
kind of act of faith. You talked about your rebuilding trust. You're making major shifts outside of your work. You've moved across the world. You're in a completely new country. There's a lot of change going on. It's not the kind of change that the sort of logical part of your brain that's like, come on, what's next on the CV wants to see, right?
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
are really making those shifts and you are doing work. you're not, there's a lot of work happening right now. So I would really encourage you to just try to remind yourself that you are doing the work right now, and that process will take as long as it takes. And there is no rushing in it. And actually, as you said yourself, if you rush it or you push it, there is a real chance that you're going to end up back in a situation that doesn't feel right to you.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you could get a job in the next couple of weeks if it was just about getting a job, but it's not. So, that was the first thing. And I would really try to sort of really remind yourself and actively remind your nervous system, like, I'm doing the work, I'm right where I need to be. Something that you can kind of say to yourself, like, when those thoughts come up of like, what about this great big gap that's opening up on my CV? Like, I'm doing the work right now, I'm where I need to be. And then the second thing I would say is, and I'm speaking from my kind of personal experience here of exploring and coming out of, I was an entrepreneur for like 13 years. My company was, my whole life. I took the decision to sell that company to my team and move on to quote unquote the next chapter. That is all I knew about it. I knew that it was called the next chapter. And, the obvious thing for me to do would be to, take up board positions or consult for companies, something like this. And I just had no interest in doing it. That was completely clear to me from the beginning, but I really didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. I knew that I loved coaching. I'd kind of been exploring that just for myself, but I didn't want to be a life coach. And it just, for a really long time, I just kind of couldn't connect the dots between all of this experience that I had as an entrepreneur and my skills as a coach, and then my kind of growing love of this concept of regeneration. I really couldn't match it. And, and I really just think, like, I just kind of love nature, and I don't know how this is ever going to make sense. And I think that looking back, what I can see is what was important for me was actually just to say yes when I had that feeling. Like you describe it as a charged up feeling. I think for me, I used to describe it as the sort of floating up feeling. Like it was this feeling of like something that's like lifting me up, and just really trust that and go with it. Like even if it made no kind of logical sense. And I'll give you a kind of specific example that really now I can see kind of changed the course of things for me. I saw a day advertised, a day's course in forest bathing, having never really heard of forest bathing at this point. And something in me was just like, yes, like I want to go. And it was actually for like forest school teachers, I think it was. And I was like, I'm not a forest school teacher, but I really want to go and learn forest bathing. So I signed up and I went on this day, and I was so scared that I was just going to be kind of completely out of my depth and with, people I didn't kind of connect with at all. And I had the most incredible experience. I just loved it. I loved just sitting in nature, just being with nature. I was like, everybody needs to do this all the time. It's incredible. And it wasn't that I was going to go and be a forest bathing, practitioner. That wasn't the course for me, but I just was able just to trust it. So now I can see that experience of me learning to really sit in nature and seeing how powerful it was for the other people in the group, their connection with nature and what that unlocked for them. Now I can see that makes sense, because in many ways that's what I'm helping people to do with their careers. But, back then, 2 years ago, it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And there's been a lot of things along the path where I've been able just to say yes, and, without any understanding of how that was all going to piece together. And then eventually, at the beginning of this year, suddenly things just kind of clicked into place. And it's really, like you said, it happened super quickly. Like it, really quickly within the space of like a few days of thinking about this, I was like, oh, I know what I want to do. I know who I want to do it for. I know what it's called. I know the kinds of things I'm going to teach. Like it just really came together. And, you mentioned, I think it's really important to say this, like, it's a privileged position to be in, to do that kind of exploration. But if you have the means to do that, like, that's what I would say. Like, let yourself be in the stillness as long as you need to. And at the same time, when you get that yes, go all in on that yes. Like whatever it is, if it's the course, it sounds like you got some of that yes with the Shoemaker College when you were looking
I
at that,
did.
right? Like,
Oh yeah.
so really disappointing that that isn't going to work out. But what can you find that's similar to that? What other organizations are there that are teaching in similar ways? I can actually send you some links, some ideas that I have after our call, to similar organizations. But just, I feel like it's about just really, really honoring that yes. Yeah, like
Hmm.
I'm really going to follow that yes. What's coming up for you?
Feels very empowering, and I think that is part of what I miss, is because your thoughts kind of get ahead of you, and then you lose this connection, which is what you were saying about being in that stillness and saying yes only when it feels like a yes, and not questioning it, not trying to analyze it and dissect it, but just move ahead with that and just allow everything to fall in place, because we are co-creators, we're not doing this in separation. And so trusting that, really trusting that, um, it feels right, and I want to be able to hold that intention, or this this energy that I feel right now, and remind myself about that every time I do a job search, or every time I'm holding a conversation. I'm trusting that it's all in the timing as well, because if I'm meant to be in the stillness longer than what my checklist shows me, then I'm meant to be. And if I'm meant to be in that stillness, then what what am I what am I trying to experience, that is that I that I have to cultivate as I move forward, as I come out into spring? Is there more that I need to cultivate? I don't know. But
So
it's
let me
it's
ask that question back to you. What is it that you need to experience in this time?
this time, I think it's a bit challenging for me to describe it, because I really know the kind of work I want to do and the organizations I want to be a part of. Unfortunately, there aren't too many. And I guess this is the whole ecosystem of shifting the way we think, the regeneration of our social systems, our economic systems. They are they exist, and I want to be a part of them rather than starting something by myself. Because I still feel like I want a mentor, I want to be a part of an organization and co-create. So that feels very much me. And what do I need to experience in order to really get there? I don't know. Don't Yeah. If I have to be honest, I don't know. I think it's just having more confidence
Yeah.
and speaking my truth and speaking my about my experience, because I've not taken a traditional route. I've had these ways of like interdisciplinary experiences. So it's not a traditional way of approaching work. I've approached it in a very non-traditional way as well. So a lot of the times when I'm applying for a job or for an opportunity, it's like, will I be will I be ignored, or will I be seen as somebody who is not the traditional profile, and so not considered. So not having that confidence in how I present myself.
I'm going to just point out something that I hear when you're talking about this, which is I hear a lot of clarity about the kind of work you want to do around systems change. And you said you also know the kinds of organizations that you want to do it for. So I hear like there's already quite a lot of focus for you. And then you described that the part that's missing is this confidence, and when it comes to kind of presenting yourself and telling a story and how it's going to be received. So it's interesting because the kinds of organizations that are involved in systems change, the sort of response that I think you're maybe fearing is, I think, a response that's rooted in the old model of work.
Hmm.
And these new organizations, like, I wonder, for example, like, what would it be like if you just told exactly your story? If you talked about exactly what you've been describing to me, right? This journey that you've been on, because right from the beginning of our conversation, you were able to really clearly articulate like what it takes to what I like to call like decorporatize, or like you know
Mm-hmm.
decolonize or detangle ourselves from this old model of work. Like I feel like any organization that is meaningfully engaged in systems change is going to have so much respect for someone who comes and says, I've taken a year or however long it is, right, to sit with these questions, to really, to really think about what kind of world of work I want to be part of, what really matters to me. Like, this is now what's clear to me. This is what I really want to pursue. That to me feels like a very empowered position to be in, rather than thinking of like, oh, there's this kind of questionable 8-month pause on my CV,
Yeah.
right? Which is just total corporate nonsense, right?
Yep, it is. It is, and I have to detach from that way of thinking. And you're right. It is telling my story with a sense of inner belief as well. Like, I believe in my story. I believe in the actions that I've taken, and I think I'm coming to see that I actually believe in myself, because a lot of the times the experiences that have shaped us sometimes take us away from that belief system, just not believing in ourselves, because we're so programmed to believe in everything outside of us rather than in us. And even coming to the UK has been stepping stone in helping me believe in myself. And so it is holding that and just being confident about it, and not seeing the work as something that you absolutely are beholden to. Like, we almost have the slave mentality of just like, oh my god, I have to say XYZ and even tweak my profile in a certain way because you need to be accepted, and just
Right.
taking a
You
step
don't
back and
you
just
don't
being
need
you.
to manipulate yourself into anything other than who you are and where you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have a homework suggestion for you,
Okay.
which is take some time and write. How long has it been since you left your last employment?
May of this
Okay,
year.
right. So not that long. Okay.
No.
So since that time, I want you to write the most beautiful story about where you are right now. As I said, the work that you're doing, this internal work that you're doing, the incredible questions that have come up from you, the discomfort that you've been brave enough to face, the shift in perspective that you've had as you've stepped out of that model of work, where it's this kind of ceaseless productivity and work, and like you said, this beholden kind of relationship. Like, write that story. Don't write it for anyone else other than yourself,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
just write it in all its kind of beauty and honesty and vulnerability. And you may never do anything with it. You may just have that story, but I think it will really help you to get the confidence of what is the true story about this pause that you're taking in the career. Because this like kind of old conditioning voice wants to creep in and tell you that it's, this is this kind of inconvenience on your CV that people are not going to respond to very well. So,
Yeah.
hi voice, we see you, and this is the true story, right? So write it for yourself, and who knows, you may even find that it's a story that you want to start weaving into conversations that you're having, maybe applications that you're doing, but just start by writing it for yourself.
I will do that. I have been meaning to do something like this, and I just didn't know where to start. But I think this is a very good homework almost for me to write this, and it's important to have that clarity written down. It's almost like the actualization in a physical form. You just write it and it's there. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
I will do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I hope you have a really joyful experience of writing that story. And yeah, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was very like releasing to be able to talk to somebody and really be guided in your thoughts and in your feelings. We need more of this. So thank you.